So for today's agenda, we're going to first go over who I am and why I'm speaking to you today. We're going to discuss what the definition of physical activity is, and the benefits behind physical activity, the exercise guidelines for adults with spinal cord injury, examples of exercises that can be done at home, as well as tips on getting started, and then we're going to conclude with a Q&A session at the end. So start off, my name is Aaron Wexler. I just completed my undergraduate degree in kinesiology from Brock University in April. And during my time at Brock, I was a lead volunteer at Power Cord, at an exercise program designed for individuals with spinal cord injury, multiple sclerosis, and lower leg amputations. I was also a research assistant in several academic studies, all pertaining to spinal cord injuries. So the two which I was most heavily involved in included high intensity interval training, also known as HIIT, and its association with the secondary health complications associated with spinal cord injury, as well as my second study I played a large role in, investigated the effects of cannabis on neuropathic pain in spinal cord injury as well. So this fall, I will be starting the Master of Physical Therapy program at the University of Toronto, with the hopes of one day becoming a neurological physiotherapist. I'm very excited for this opportunity, and I'm really starting to pick up things along the way to take me into my future. But this summer, I've had the privilege and the honor to work with Spinal Cord Injury Ontario in their marketing and communications department. I actually created the invite and the forms you guys need to fill out in order to attend this session. So you are, without even knowing it, you are familiar with some of my work. But I look to stay affiliated with SCIO for the foreseeable future. And I thought this opportunity with the Marcom department was the perfect way to get involved and, really find myself in the field. So now we can start the actual presentation now that you have an understanding of who I am. So on the next slide, let's talk about physical activity. So before we can talk about how to be physically active or why it's important, it's first important to understand what the definition of physical activity is. So the World Health Organization defines physical activity as any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscle that requires energy expenditure. That being said, it is an all-encompassing term which is used broadly and typically divided into two categories: natural movement and recreational activities. So these include fitness activities, transportation, sports and active recreation, domestic activities, mindful movement, and occupational activities. We'll break this down further on the next slide. So that'll be the next slide. Awesome. So natural movement includes activities which are essential for our daily lives. So this includes transportation, and that can be using a wheelchair to get around, a walker, cycling, or however else one would get around. Occupational, and that refers to work that requires manual labor. So this can be during a job, during a volunteer position, but it's while you're working, any sort of activity you're doing then. Then domestic activity, so that can include household chores, gardening, vacuuming, helping someone move out of their home, really anything that is housework. And then we have recreational physical activity, and that is activity that we engage in as part of our hobbies and leisure time. So that can be fitness activities, so like going to the gym, completing activity-based workouts, weight training, or utilizing exercise machines. Sport and active recreation, so that can be like team sports or individual sports. And then mindful movement, which could include yoga, Pilates, general stretching, or more, like whatever really gets you into that Zen mindset. So next slide. So I'm sure you've heard by now that exercise is good for you. But now I want to talk about what the actual benefits of exercise are. So on the surface level, There are both immediate effects and long-term effects of physical activity. Also, I am using physical activity and exercise interchangeably, even though I know exercise is more pertaining to like the physical activity or the fitness activity that we just mentioned, but physical activity is where I'm referring to. So the immediate effects that can occur after a single bout of moderate to vigorous activity, physical activity, include improved brain health by improving sleep quality, reduce depression and anxiety, as well as it can help keep your thinking, learning, and judgment skills sharp as you age, as well as it is proven to reduce your blood pressure. And that's all immediately after one bout of exercise. Over the long term, regular physical activity can also provide important health benefits, such as reduced risks of developing dementia, lowers the risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes, as well as it lowers the risk of developing 8 types of cancer, as well as helps with weight management, improves bone health, as well as improves coordination, all of which are important for individuals with spinal cord injury. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about how much physical activity you're going to need to see some benefits. So because this is the million-dollar question, how much physical activity is required in order to see those benefits we mentioned? Well, in September of 2017, an evidence-based scientific exercise guideline for adults with spinal cord injury was published by an international group of 29 researchers, clinicians, and community organizations with the intentions of informing people with spinal cord injury how much exercise is necessary for important fitness health benefits, such as cardiorespiratory fitness, muscle strength, and cardiometabolic health. So on the next slide, we're just going to break those down because these benefits are really important, but it's important to understand how they relate to your daily life. So cardiometabolic health encompasses measures of body composition, such as fat mass, lean body mass, as well as risk factors for cardiovascular disease, such as high cholesterol and hypertension. The threshold to reach cardiometabolic benefits will reduce these factors and then induce positive changes of body composition. Cardiovascular fitness refers to the ability of the heart and lungs to deliver oxygen to the working muscles. So by meeting the thresholds for cardiovascular fitness benefits, you will be improving your stamina, which means the amount of time you can sustain physical activity for. So the amount of time you can spend wheeling in your wheelchair, completing housework, or however else you choose to be active. Lastly, muscle strength refers to the amount of force that is required for a muscle can exert. So by increasing your muscle strength, you'll be able to exert more force, allowing you to lift more weight, making it easier to complete daily tasks, such as completing transfers. So now that we have that under wraps, on the next slide, we'll talk about how much physical activity we need to see some benefits. So in order to see cardiorespiratory and muscle strength benefits, the guideline suggests that adults with spinal cord injury should engage in at least 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic exercise at least 2 times a week. And in case you don't know, aerobic exercise is just any sort of cardiovascular conditioning. So where you're breathing heavily and you're working hard for a long or an extended period of time. So that can be like wheeling around the neighborhood, your house, swimming, arm cycling, any type of cardiovascular workout that gets your heart pumping and moving. So along with the aerobic exercise, the guideline also recommends one completes 3 sets of strength training exercises for each major functioning muscle group at a moderate to vigorous intensity. So a functioning muscle group refers to the muscle groups which the individual has voluntary control over. And it's important to understand that everyone is different and everyone has different functioning muscle groups. So some muscle groups include the shoulders, the arms, the wrists, the core, the back, the hips, and so on. So that is what you need in order to see your cardiorespiratory fitness and your muscle strength benefits. On the next slide, we're going to be looking at how much benefits or how much physical activity you need to see your cardiometabolic health benefits. So the guideline recommends that an individual engages in at least 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic exercise 3 times a week. So as mentioned on the previous slide, aerobic exercise is any type of cardiovascular exercise. So being able to complete one or multiple exercises at a moderate to vigorous intensity for a total of 30 minutes 3 times a week will yield these cardiometabolic benefits we mentioned earlier. We're going to get into exercises a bit more later on, but some of these cardiovascular exercises you can do at home include seated boxing, hand cycling, wheeling in a wheelchair, dancing, and more. So just giving you examples of what the possibilities are for you to get these this exercise in. So on the next slide, perfect. We're going to talk about what moderate to vigorous intensity actually means. So on the screen, you're looking at a nice colorful graphic, which is referred to as the Borg Rating of Perceived Exertion Scale, also known as the RPE scale. And there's several versions of the scale, but the one that we're going to be discussing starts at level 1, which is very light activity or intensity, which means hardly any exertion. The screen says more than sleeping and watching TV, but not much more than that. But it goes all the way up to 10, where it feels like the intensity is almost impossible to keep working at. So when the guideline recommends moderate to vigorous intensity, they're referring to that 4 to 8 range on this scale. So moderate intensity is when you begin breathing heavily, but you can hold a short conversation. It is still somewhat comfortable, but noticeably more challenging. But vigorous intensity is when you're working so hard that it is borderline uncomfortable and you are short of breath and probably not able to speak as much. It's really hard to really gauge individual intensity ratings. So we use a talk test as a measure of relative intensity. So in this test, at moderate intensity exercise, you should be able to talk in sentences, but you would not be able to sing a song. But during vigorous intensity exercises, you would not be able to say a few more than a few words without pausing for a breath. So that's a good way to kind of hone in where you are at and what intensity you're exercising at. So on the next slide, we're going to go over a few recommendations to consider about physical activity and the guidelines specifically. So number 1, it's important to understand that the guidelines express the minimum amount of exercise needed to see benefits, not the ideal amount of exercise. So the ideal recommended for adults is at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity or 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity a week. So if someone exercises more than the guidelines recommendations, they will see more benefits. But if they exercise underneath the benefits, underneath the recommendations, they won't see the benefits, but they are still meeting that ideal amount of physical activity, and that is still very, very good. Number 2, the guidelines are only as good as the research they're derived from. So as I mentioned, the publication was published in 2017. That is going to be 5 years ago, very shortly. So it's important to understand the research is ever evolving. So the guidelines will also be ever evolving and better over the years. So it's important to keep checking in, do what you feel comfortable doing, but also be mindful that things could change in the future. Number 3, exercise is for everybody and every body. It might look different from person to person, but there are plenty of ways to adapt exercises and make it possible for anyone. All it takes is some patience and a bit of creativity. And we're going to talk about some creativity later on, but it's always important to keep that in mind. And number 4 is probably the most important, which is why it's in bold. If you are new to exercise, you should always check with your doctor or medical physician first before trying any new forms of physical activity, especially when it comes to lifting weights and putting your body under new forms of stress. So those are my recommendations. So that's like the midway point. On the next slide, it's kind of a question slide. So if anyone has any questions so far, I'd be happy to maybe help and answer them out. feel free to put in the chat or put your hand up, or choose not to ask any questions. That's totally fine as well. I understand.
Yeah.
I hope you guys are still with me.
No questions in the chat.
All
So
right. Well, if you guys have any questions, feel free to either write them in the chat or write them down and ask them at the end of the session. But if no questions, then we can move on to the fun stuff, or I think it's fun. I don't want to put any thoughts in your head, but I think they're fun. So now we're going to go on to exercises which can be completed at home. So from my experience working with individuals with spinal cord injury, I've noticed that transportation, accessible gyms, and financial accessibility pose large barriers to being physically active. That being said, exercises which require minimal equipment and can be completed at home are ideal, especially when you're beginning and still kind of finding yourself. So we're going to go run through a few exercise ideas which require minimal equipment, some open space, and of course, medical clearance. Don't forget the medical clearance. So some materials that you may require, I try to find exercises that are A, feasible, but B, require household items or can use household items. So I like to use, instead of dumbbells that can sometimes be quite expensive, I like to use 2 cans of food that are around the same size. So I'm going to be using my Great Value dark red kidney beans and then my Great Value black eyed peas. So the cans are the same size, and because of that, I'm going to use them together. So 2 cans of the same food. You should be able to tell if they're the same size or not, just by eyeballing it. But as long as they're close in weight, that is pretty much what matters. And then you also have a snack for after your session as well. So there's benefits of that. So next, any sort of ball, pillow, or light soft object that you have at home. So I have I guess a pillow ball. And I'll show you what we'll be doing with it soon, but it can be a pillow or a normal ball, something that you feel comfortable throwing and catching again. Then 2 large bath towels or blankets. They don't have to be large, but the larger the towel, the heavier they will feel. So if you're looking to really challenge yourself, a bigger towel will definitely get you there. But if you're looking to just start out, a very light towel or blanket will suffice. And then if someone doesn't have voluntary control of their hands, you can use plastic grocery bags in a few creative ways that I will show you very shortly. And you can put the loops on your hand and your arm, and you don't have to actually do any grabbing or squeezing for the exercises. So next, we're going to run through the few exercises. I think we have 5 planned, and there's a lot. And I do have my email at the end in case you do want any more, but these are the ones that I think are good to start with. So very first, I couldn't find stock images, so I took photos myself. But this is the Pavlov press. So for this exercise, you're going to start with either your weight, and if you don't want weight, you can just use your hands. I'm going to use weight for the demonstration. You're going to start with them by your chest, and in the photo, you can see my elbows are bent. And you're going to keep your core tight. And while you're in this position, sitting up in your chair, you're going to extend all the way out. And you can see my beans just like that. Extend all the way out and back in. And that is 1 repetition of this exercise. Again, if you're just starting out, I like to recommend starting with a low amount of repetitions, also known as reps, because you don't want to overwork yourself just yet. It's better to work your way up rather than starting too high and then realizing it when it's too late. So I would start with 5, seeing how that feels, maybe going down, maybe going up, maybe adding weight. It's really up to you, but this is the movement that we're going for. And it's good to do that 5 times, 3 times. So 3 sets of 5. So we're going to be doing 5 repetitions, 3 separate times. But again, everyone is different and everyone has different starting places. So it's very good to be mindful of that as well. And if 5 isn't your number, it just takes a bit of trial and error to figure out what your number is. So as you can see on the right, you can see I have a plastic bag on my hand, and I will quickly demonstrate what that is for. So as I mentioned earlier, if someone doesn't have volunteer control of their hand, or it might not be as strong as they might need it to hold the weight, what they can do is they can take their plastic bag, take their can, put the can in the plastic bag as if you're, I guess, buying it from a grocery store. And then you're gonna put it on your hand this way, or have someone help you put it on your hand this way. Squeeze the air out, or have someone else squeeze the air out. Twist it, hold it down, and then you're gonna twist it around your hand. And you can either have it dangle like this, and the more it dangles, the more stabilization you need from your shoulder, which is pretty cool because you're working other muscle groups while you're focusing on your chest. But you can make it a bit tighter, and then it's not flailing around as much either. But the one thing is, so you can buy straps. So in Power Cord, which is where I was the volunteer, we had these wrist bands, and they had weights in them. So it was a weighted wristband for the same reason, except they cost upwards of $50 each, and then you have to buy weights for them as well. So this is a bit more cost efficient. And again, if you're just starting out and you might not want to invest all the money right away, this is definitely a good alternative. So if you are interested in what muscle groups are being activated, because I did tell you muscle groups are important, this exercise will be working your core, which are like your ab muscles, your tummy muscles, your arms, and your chest and your shoulders. So a lot of major muscle groups working at once. So it's a very good exercise for that. And again, if you have any questions about it, feel free to hold on to them to the end. But we can move on to the second one. Next slide, please. Excellent. So we have our seated wall ball throws. So for this exercise, you're going to need either your ball, pillow, or any light, soft object you have at home. So again, I kind of have a perfect ball for this. You might not. That's totally fine. A pillow works. And what we're going to be doing is you're going to want to start by sitting up tall in your chair in front of a wall. And you're going to take your object and you're going to throw it upwards over your head towards that wall, and then catch it when it comes back down, as seen in the photo. And you're going to want to try to keep your core tight, extend your arms as far as you can go, and try to get yourself through the entire movement properly. And again, if you don't feel comfortable throwing an object and catching it, you can modify the activity by just holding the ball and just doing the movement as its own. I find that when you do throw the ball or the pillow or whatever it is, you do really get more force out of it because you're not afraid to let go of it. But the movement and the range of motion is very important in itself. So even if you have nothing you want to throw, this movement's great. Or if you want to use a weight of some sort, if you want to use those cans, I don't know where the second one went. Oh, it's in my bag. So you want to use the cans, you want to just go above the head, same movement, same benefit. So just a few options there. And again, you can do the same thing where you put the bag on your wrist. And I'm happy to show you that again if you like. But yeah, so this exercise is good for another few muscle groups. So your shoulders, primarily, your upper back, your arms, as well as your chest. So another good group that encompasses a lot of different muscle groups at once. So moving on, go to slide 17. These are our seated battle ropes. So you may have seen these in movies or in training montages or in gyms, wherever you've seen them. They're these big ropes that I think were adapted from ropes that would tie up big ships. And they're used to, I guess, it's a cardiovascular endurance exercise. So instead of buying, these ropes are super duper expensive. I tried buying them and I gave up because they're super expensive. So instead, I started using blankets and it works pretty much just as well. So I have my, I guess you can't tell, but it's an M&M's blanket. And what I did is I rolled it up. So it's a nice thick line. And I have this one, and then I have a towel as well with the same type of length and I guess weight to it. And I'm going to be sitting in my chair, making sure I have enough space. I'm going to sit up nice and tall in my chair, keeping my core tight, holding on to the ends of both my towel and my blanket. And I'm going to be moving my arms up and down. And I know you can't really see what I'm doing, But if you can see the image, the individual in the image is making waves. So when one arm goes up, the other one goes down, and it's simulating waves. So and you're going to want to try to keep this motion continuous for about 30 to 45 seconds if you can to start. Again, you can go lower or higher. It's really where you're comfortable, especially when you're starting. But it's just about getting this movement going. And then if you have trouble with your hands or arms, you again can wrap it around your wrist. And if you have a really long blanket, you can actually tie it. And if you have a short blanket, you can get some sort of strap and just strap them onto your wrist. And that can be, again, a strap can be like a string and just tie it on and have someone help you with that, or whatever you're comfortable doing. And yeah, this is a cardiovascular exercise that also works out your shoulders and your arms. So number 4 on the next slide. So we're going back to our weights. So this is our seated flies, and it's kind of like a butterfly when, you know, they're opening and closing their wings. So you're gonna be sitting up in your chair. You want your cans again in your hands, or if you don't want the cans, you can just do a free hands. And you're gonna be sitting up, starting with your chest, like your arms extended, cans out, and you're going to try to bring your cans back, like you can see in the photo, and it should feel like you're pinching a shoulder, I can say an avocado in between your shoulder blades. And those muscles are called your scapular retractors. So your shoulder blade is actually called your scapula. And there's something called this upper cross syndrome. And that's when the muscles of your chest, so your pec muscles, become overly tight. And that can happen from a lot of sitting and, you know, typing and leaning. And you get this upper cross syndrome where these muscles up front are really tight and these muscles on the back are really loose and extended. So this exercise is really important because it forces you to strengthen those muscles. So going back and forth will allow you to do so. So again, if you are uncomfortable or unable, or you would rather just let your arms bear the weight, you can use the bags again on your wrists, just so you don't have to actually hold them. It might make it easier if you want even more of a challenge. Letting it dangle a little bit while you do this exercise. I guess be wary that you have a dangling can from your wrist, but at the same time, it requires your shoulders to activate and be more stable throughout the movement. So there's a lot of benefits from changing things up, and it's pretty cool what you can do. So I again think 5 is a good place to start. It might be too much, it might be too little. It's just really about feeling where you're comfortable. And then you can add and reduce resistance if you please. So again, if cans seem to be not heavy enough, but maybe don't trust me on this, but for me, they're personally heavy enough. Like I don't want any more weight than that. So I'd definitely recommend starting with cans, but you can also move up if you want to buy weights or use a heavier household object. I have seen people using bricks before, and they are heavier than cans. And I guess you can put them in a bag as well if you wanted. So, and then this is, again, your scapular retractors, shoulders, and your traps. So next one. So this one isn't as much of an exercise, more of a stretch, but it is very important. So many people with a spinal cord injury don't have voluntary control of their legs. However, even if there isn't voluntary control, it's still very important to stretch out the muscle group because glucose is very essential for, I guess, energy storage as well as energy production. And if you want, we can go really in depth into the physiology of it, but I don't want to bore you too much. But these muscles, although they might not have voluntary control, they still can store glucose, which is really good and important. So being able to stretch those muscles and relieve them not only helps with, I guess, decreasing tightness and knots in your muscles and joints, but also allows for more energy storage to occur. So in the first picture, we're going to look at stretching out your calf muscle, which is that muscle behind your lower leg. And as you can see, I'm sitting on my bed, and I think the bed is easiest. You can also use the floor, but the bed is more fun. I have my blanket. It's around the top portion of my foot. My other leg that I'm not stretching out at the time is relaxed. And I put the blanket right in the middle of my foot at the top, and I pull back. And I'm getting that very gentle stretch on the calf muscle. And then to transition into number 2, what you can do, and again, okay, we'll talk about that in a later, but this is just for if you do have the hand control, or if you choose to use the hand control, you're gonna hold the 2 sides of the blanket or the towel with one hand, put your other hand on your knee and extend it, and you can push it forward by pulling back on the towel and pushing with your knee, or pushing on your knee. And this will stretch out your hamstring muscles. And those are the back of your thigh. And those are very big muscles, and they get very tight very fast. And then the last one, what we're going to do is you're going to take the towel and the blanket, put it under your knee, and you're going to pull it back into you. And you can use whatever grip you're comfortable with. I use the power grip, which is where you just like grab it this way, and you just force it back into your chest. Try to bring your knee to your nose if you can. And that's the goal of those exercises, just to stretch, and that one stretches out your gluteal group, also known as your hip extensors. It's the ones that allow you to perform hip extension. And those are the movements that we want to do. And again, if you do not have that hand control, what you can do is you can take your bags. You might need 2, you might need 3. It's really what you're comfortable with or what you need. You can tie the bottoms of them together and have one continuous bag. And then you can put the loops around your arms again, just like we did before. And then it kind of simulates that towel. I don't know if you can see it, but you can still put this on your leg. You probably need, I think it's always good to change it up however you can. So if you feel comfortable on the floor or in the chair or in the walker, I definitely recommend using all of them if you can. And then that also just opens the range of exercises you can do too, because in a walker, you might be able to do some, I guess, more, reach further, where in a chair you have more stability, you can actually push further and feel more comfortable doing that, versus a floor where you can be on the ground and doing stuff that way as well, and working against gravity. So I definitely recommend it, and there's lots of different ways you can exercise on all 3 planes. But great question, thank you.
I'm sorry, I actually lost my internet, so should I continue sharing the screen from the last point where we disconnected?
Sure, that'd be awesome. So, yeah, after these stretches, it's important. So on the next slide, what we can look at is what we do before and after we exercise. So now that we know how to exercise and what physical activity is, let's talk about the importance of a warm-up and a cool-down, because this is something that's very often overlooked, especially when you're exercising for the first time at home and when you're just starting out. So a proper warm-up and cool-down basically is a gradual progression of your heart rate. So not only does it allow your body to prepare mentally and physically for the physical activity you'll be performing, but it also allows your muscles to get warmed up, as well as your head to really get in that exercise mindset. So warming up increases your heart rate and therefore your blood flow, which enables more oxygen to reach your muscles. So you're less tense, you're more agile, and more, I guess, less susceptible to injury. So a warm-up examples can include wheeling around your house or your neighborhood, seated shoulder shrugs, seated arm circles, seated side bends, and then you can do arm pumps, which is like you're jogging on the spot, or you're just like pumping on the spot. Arm flaps, which is pretending you're a bird, This is one of my favorites. It's really good, kind of tough, but it's a good one. And there's tons of more warm-ups you can do. You just have to maybe look for it, or shoot me a message and we can figure it out together. But anything that gets you gradually started, or gets you gradually get your muscles moving for about 5 minutes, is a good warm-up. And you basically do the same thing to cool down, because it's the same thing. Because when you're working out, you accumulate a lot of lactic acid in your muscles, which is when you feel the burn of exercise, it's actually lactic acid in your muscles that is just accumulating and accumulating. Again, if you want to talk physiology, we can definitely do that, but it's not very fun sometimes. So doing a warm up will help rid your body of that burn and allow you to not be as sore the next day. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about some tips for getting started, because that was definitely one of the things I struggled with the most. Because it's always hardest getting started. The first session is always the hardest. So number one, wear comfortable clothing that permits the range of motion required for the activity. So I always recommend wearing some sort of gym clothes, even if you're not, you might not be actually, on your feet at all, but wearing running shoes or like closed-toe shoes is always a good idea as well, in case you drop a weight or something pops up and I guess you want to protect yourself. Closed-toe shoes and gym clothes, always recommended. And this just helps prepare our body and mind for exercise, as well as it allows you to be safe while you exercise. Because there's no worse feeling than ripping clothing while you're exercising and having to change and it becoming a whole ordeal. Number two, like I just mentioned, always start an exercise session with proper warm-up and cool down. A warm-up can include wheeling around your house, arm circles, pumps, and flaps, just as we went over. Pretty much anything that gets your heart gradually moving. And then you want to do it again at the end of the session to bring down your heart rate. Number three, you want to make sure that you check your area you're going to be active in for any hidden dangers or hazards that might be posing a threat, especially if you're wheeling around your house. You don't want anything sticking out or in the way of your wheelchair, because that would be a hazard. So yeah, always look at that. I always recommend, if you have a place you can exercise consistently, do that. So you only have to do one hazard check and not really worry about, I guess, hazards being there every time you go. And it makes it less, I guess you need less time to set up before you exercise. Number four, drink water during your activity. Water is definitely the best drink during physical activity, and I definitely recommend drinking water without sugars or caffeine before, after, and during your activity. Also, if you want a carbo load, which is also fun, a small snack about 20 to 30 minutes before your workout is also beneficial to provide you with a bit more energy before you start your physical activity. Number five, if you start to feel faint, lightheaded, dizzy, or ill, you should stop doing what you're doing immediately. If you continue not to feel ill, you should seek medical attention right away. For someone with spinal cord injury, pounding headache, severe sweating can all be signs of autonomic dysreflexia, which means that your blood pressure is getting too high. And if this happens, you should stop immediately, remove any irritating stimuli, which could be emptying your bladder, loosening tight clothing, or other irritants of your body, such as that wristband could definitely be an irritant. And then you want to monitor your symptoms after and see if they start to go away. For number six, you want to check the weather, because as you know, these Ontario weathers has been quite unproductive. Can definitely affect your attire and your activity. So if you're going outside for activity, it's important to dress appropriately, bring extra water in case it's a very hot day. If you're inside and it's really hot outside, I'd recommend reducing the temperature of your house and opening some windows to get some fresh air to help you reduce your heat as your body temperature rises. Because when you work out, you do get heat hotter. If you want to take further precautions, I stand next to you as well as spraying yourself with cool water as you are physically active. And then this goes for the winter as well. Cold morning can really suck, especially if you're trying to be active. So dress appropriately, wear layers, wear gloves, cover up anything you're going to be using, and that should be good. Number 7, don't forget to breathe. That one is one that a lot of people don't really think about a whole lot because when you're physically active, a lot of people think that they're stronger or they have more energy in them if they're not breathing. And trust me, that's not the case. It can actually be quite dangerous because it can result in a lack of oxygen reaching your brain. And when that happens, you can either lose strength or you can actually faint. And depending on what type of activity you're doing, that can become quite hazardous. So properly breathing helps you stay calm, collected, and engages more muscles so you get the most out of your workout. So breathing is essential. And our next slide, these are also some fun, important tips on how to stay motivated, because this is definitely something that can be hard. It's definitely hard for me to stay motivated sometimes, but these tips help. So number 1, get outside. Try to get outside as much as you can, unless it's like, raining or excruciatingly hot. It can be really nice to go outside. It changes your environment, and that can help with your mindset and feeling that you have energy that you didn't know you had. Going for a wheel around your neighborhood is a great way to de-stress and get some physical activity in. I definitely recommend it. Number 2, set goals for yourself. They can be super, super simple, such as completing 10 to 20 minutes of continuous exercise 3 days a week. And you can just set goals for yourself and do your best to reach that goal. And then once you reach that goal and you're comfortable, you can increase that goal as you please. As we mentioned, we went over some guidelines that are recommended by some scientists. But again, like that is a lot of exercise. Like it's a lot, especially when you're first starting, it can be quite daunting. But that's important to realize that you're not expected to be able to hit all that exercise right from the get-go because it's a lot. But I recommend you set bite-sized goals and you gradually progress, do what you're comfortable with. You want to make sure that you're not hating it and you're not like in a state where you dread exercising because it's just too much. So set goals, but make sure they're realistic and you're comfortable with those goals you set. Number 3, make a weekly plan. I highly recommend you schedule your physical activity into your calendar. This way you're a lot more likely to adhere and stick to your goals. And like if you treat it like an appointment you can't miss, you won't miss it. So I use daily reminders on my phone. It tells me to get active every so often. It depends on what I'm doing that day. If I'm working from home and I'm sitting all day and I'm not, moving very often, I am going to set an hour alarm, and every hour I'm going to take a 5-minute break just to move and do, like it can be easy as those flies that we were talking about, or the arm curl. Just getting the arms moving, getting the chest moving and engage the back. It's all really what it is. So I definitely recommend you make a weekly plan and integrate it into your, daily activities. Number 4, have a partner. Very, very important because an exercise buddy or somebody you can complete household chores with, play recreational sports with, or even virtually exercise with will provide that motivation you need when it's not coming internally. Because if you guys hold, or if anyone, I said guys, but if anyone holds each other accountable, that's the best way to, kind of ensure that you don't give up on yourself. And because there are days where you're not going to want to do it, but your friend will get you there. And that's really important. During the pandemic, we adopted using a speakerphone or video call while exercising so it wasn't like you were alone. So I definitely recommend it. You can find virtual exercises online, or you can make your own physical activity plan, or again, you can reach out to me and I can help you make a physical activity plan for you to complete with a friend. And number 5, complete physical activity that you enjoy. So for example, if you enjoy playing sports or going out for a wheel, do that. There's lots of ways to be physically active. So don't be afraid to mix it up once in a while. If you keep doing the same thing every single day, like some people love it. I do the same thing every day, so I can't really talk. But some people get bored really easily. But if you change it up every once in a while, it keeps things from getting bored and you might have more of a desire to do it. So I definitely recommend completing something you enjoy, because if you do something you don't love, you're not going to want to do it. And it's as simple as that. So find physical activity that you enjoy and do that. And number 6, use online resources. There are so many seated exercises created by people with spinal cord injury for people with spinal cord injury. These classes provide you an instructor, so it doesn't feel like you're alone following, I guess, a piece of paper. And it can feel like you're alone sometimes. So being with this a YouTube video or an online tutorial definitely allows you to feel that company and social aspect of being physically active. And going on to our last slide. Dimna? Thank you very much for your time. That is it. I have nothing else I really want to share with you. I think that we hit some really important marks. I really appreciate you letting me speak with you today. I did my best to finish before 4 p.m. And we did okay. 3:59. Thank you. Those are my citations. I don't know if you can see them. If you're interested in looking where the research came from, they're all there. But if anyone has any questions or any queries, or you would like me to go and explain something again, I would be very happy to answer whatever you have, as I'm sure other people have the same questions.